Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a game I almost never played. Despite enjoying the first game and X, I was on the fence about purchasing the game solely because of how it looked too different compared to its predecessors. As someone who even bought X on launch day, it is not a good sign when I'm not immediately booking my pre-order when they make a sequel. 3 years later, I can safely tell you that it is one of my favorite games of all time, and that it includes one of my favorite characters of all time, Zeke! Although, he's not too interesting. He just has great stage presence. Not too much to make a video on. So instead, let's talk about Mythra. I feel that all the major themes of this game are at least somewhat related to Mythra. However, one that I feel Mythra and her Aegis counterpart Pyra are most burdened with is purpose. A theme that I didn't give too much thought until the release of the Torna prequel. Of course, spoilers ahead for Torna DLC and all of the main game. Our blonde Aegis protagonist begins the Torna story as basically a child. She has been in the world for only about a year since being awakened from her crystal. Her sole purpose of being awakened and working alongside Adam is to defeat Malos, and she very well knows this. Mythra wields the power of the Aegis recklessly, not giving much regard to technique, or fighting style, or casualties. The not important stuff. Mythra views herself as a weapon, given power with the goal of destroying villains, and anyone that calls her a simpleton. She doesn't feel any attachment to humanity or any purpose alongside them. In Indol, when Adam asks her if humans are worth saving, Mythra's response is that it's not for her to decide. She's just a blade that is going to follow her driver's goals, whether she disagrees or not. Mythra essentially outcasts herself because of what she believes her purpose to be, that her purpose to destroy makes her different from everyone else. She doesn't want to be involved in the group picture, she sits like a loner at the campfire. It's only through her constant interactions with the likes of Adam, Laura, Milton, and the rest of the party that she develops away from a weapon and more towards acknowledging herself and acting like an actual person, realizing value in forming connections with others and enjoying your time on Alrest. Hell, she even tries to have a conversation with Jin. If that isn't courageously coming out of your isolation shell, I don't know what is. Mythra doesn't fully come into this more human view of herself, and that leaves the door open for all that development to halt and flip on its head by the climax. The writers were placed in a tricky situation with Mythra. Her entire lifespan is shown through a combination of Torna and the main game. And unlike someone like Brigid, she doesn't forget everything. How do you make Mythra compelling and develop throughout the course of Torna while still entering the main game how she does? Like this.
Why did you wake me up? I'm out of here. Bye.
Well, I think they do a pretty good job. Our gang of misfits enters the final fight with Malos, intent to stop his chaotic rampage. Mythra still knows that it's her duty and her purpose to defeat Malos, but now she sees a somewhat greater goal: to protect those that she has formed meaningful connections with. Unfortunately, she's not quite able to see that one through. In an attempt to god out his fellow Aegis' power, Malos attacks Oresco away from the fight, and Mythra responds exactly how he intends, by going absolutely rogue, unleashing the third sword of the Aegis, and taking the sword away from Adam. After the grueling Aegis war, the party is left on a Titan vessel, and they find Milton and Mikhail, and of course, Milton is dead. Super dead. Mythra is already burdened by the fact that she told the two to stay behind because it would be safer, only for it to backfire. She was the extra voice that convinced Milton and Mikhail that they had to stay in Oresco. But if only they had been with Mythra and the party, she could have protected them, just like she had wanted to. As Mythra approaches Milton's body and places her hand on his face, Mikhail tugs him away, and that right there is the small action that ripples throughout the entire story. Mythra, seeing how people react to her power, reverts back to her initial view of herself and her purpose. She is simply a weapon meant to be feared. It's not worth finding purpose in living and connections and all that garbage when you not only lose those connections, but essentially be told it's your own fault. Mythra then creates Pyra to handle literally everything and seal away the weapon that humanity fears so much. Mythra and Pyra seem to have given their purpose quite some thought over their 500-year beauty sleep. They now ask a new protagonist in Rex to take them to Elysium so they can meet the architect and directly ask the man upstairs why they were created. What is their purpose? Or at least that's the goal they claim to have. Despite being around entirely new people, Mythra still seems set on viewing her own purpose as a weapon. She switches with Pyra only to display the Aegis' power, and she leaves the more human-like interactions to her sister. Her conversation with Rex in Morardane shows that she has really only taken over for this period of time so that Rex can get practice using her as, a weapon. If Rex gets better at using the Aegis' power, then nothing can stop them from reaching the World Tree, meeting the Architect, and Pyra and Mythra achieving whatever goal they wanted. Later in the story, we figure out that this goal is not what they claimed it to be. As Rex fights Malos at the cliffs of Moritha, we realize Pyra and Mythra's true intention behind reaching Elysium was to ask the Architect that created them to kill them as well. That way, their immense power that has only brought pain and destruction would be scoured from the world. There is no point to a living being whose sole purpose is to destroy everything she touches. But of course, in true anime, JRPG fashion, the Aegis sisters are instead inspired by Rex's drive to fight for them and protect them. This allows Mythra and Pyra to temporarily overcome their fear and hatred of themselves, and rekindle that purpose they were leaning towards at the end of their adventures in Torna. Live to form bonds, and fight to protect those bonds. The scenes play out as you would expect, with the power of love triumphing for the moment, and essentially resurrecting Pyra and Mythra with the final Aegis sword. But one thing I find interesting is that when Rex asks the two of them if they love this world, Pyra is the only one that answers. Mythra just kinda smiles. It's never as simple as one action and all of a sudden a switch flips in your brain and everything is love, happiness, unicorns, and all that. To me, Mythra not responding is much more human and realistic, where she is somewhat buying into this purpose that Rex has demonstrated, but still has an inkling of a doubt that that's not what she's made for. It's difficult for her to remove herself from what she believed for so gosh darn long. And after that fight, we're off to test how much Mythra has truly grown by descending into the land of Moritha. One of my favorite Mythra scenes, and one of my favorite scenes in general, comes in Moritha, a land that was ravaged by nuclear war after the technological progress that humans made came back to bite them. Poppy looks at this place and its devastation and fears that, as a machine, she too could have the purpose of eradicating the titans and people of Alrest. Mythra sees that Poppy is going through the exact same thing she did. Poppy was getting inside her own head, and intent on not letting anyone else feel their sole purpose is for destruction, Mythra steers her straight, with a little side bargain as well. This scene stands out for Mythra a lot, and demonstrates a shift in how she labels herself and how she acts upon those labels. Up to this point, the notable Mythra moments had all involved her fighting and wielding the Aegis' might, the awakening at Aleppo Ruins, and the analytical fighting in Morardain being the main examples you may think of. None of these scenes really show Mythra just being a person and talking with another character. The only ones that are close are the scenes in Indal, where even then it feels like Mythra is more investigating Amalthus and his intentions. The dialogue from Mythra in these situations feels much more businesslike than casual. Her conversation with Poppy here is a departure from this, where Mythra is just helping someone through a problem and forming a bond with them in the process.
Lift hand up in air, then together.
It's also just cute. Skipping ahead the entire world tree climb, after the final battle with Malos, the world tree starts to crumble and fall, threatening to take down all of Alrest with it. Mythra, or Pyra depending on what you named your form, was not going to mess up again. The restored purpose that they had found to protect that which they care about, Rex in particular, causes Mythra to make the decision to pilot Aeon and save the world from the debris at the cost of her own life. She checks off all the boxes and makes sure that her decision is final and that she will see it through. No one else would end up like Milton did. Rather than her friends being victims of her power, they were going to be saved by it. In the end, Mythra gets exactly what she wanted, but she got it for a different reason. She initially believes that the only thing she was good for was her power and her fighting. Believing her power to destroy was the only purpose she had, she felt the best option for the world would be her death. But seeing Rex's own purpose of fighting and persevering to maintain the bonds that he's formed, Mythra and Pyra understand that they can live for that purpose as well. To fight for your friends, your world, and of course, that special someone. Of course, Mythra isn't the only character related to this theme of purpose. Nia has specific callouts to her purpose and the power to save others in one of the fights with Malos. Using a power she was once afraid of to protect her friends is definitely a very similar development to what we see in Mythra. Where I think the two differ is that Nia was busy looking for a purpose and eventually found it. Mythra had already found a purpose early on, but eventually reworked it into a new one. So what am I trying to get at here? Number one, I think Mythra is a fantastic character that develops quite well in both stories. I already thought pretty highly of her before, and now reviewing her story and making this video have made me like her even more. Not as much as Zeke though. Number two, at the end of the day, I think we all feel like we have that one thing we're really good at. The thing it feels like we were put on this earth to do. Whether it's math, or computer coding, or cooking, or cleaning, or whatever. However, it's important to not lose sight of greater purposes. Whether you think you were created to be a weapon, comedic relief, a Sephiroth clone, or an underutilized character slot, you still need to find purpose with others and the connections you form with them. When you achieve that, and your weird, edgy twin asks you what it was like being alive, you can tell him